Thanks. So, hello everybody, and thanks for joining this session. I'm Simone, and I've written this paper together with Neha Gupta from the Computer Science Institute at Warwick University, where I've previously been. I'm going to talk through these topics here. So let's start off. Why did we think this project was important? I've observed that there is a lot of data available, a lot of language data reflecting customer views, but also employees' views. So we don't really do a lot with this data. It just sits there. We might do topic modeling, we might do a bit of sentiment analysis, and that sort of brings me to the second thought, that computer science has really done a lot of excellent work in pushing sentiment analysis forward. It's been at the forefront of developing what we know today. But talking with Neha, we thought, well, we want to compare these different methods because psychology has been analysing language for much longer. And we wanted to see where are the similarities, where are the differences between these two sort of like line of thoughts, so to say. And of course, we're not the only ones. Mark Brispert and his colleagues from the University of Leuven in Belgium, they've done a meta-analysis. They've just compared on a conceptual level the different approaches, and they said, well, actually, psychological and computer science approaches, they complement each other. So it's not a matter of competing, but rather collaborating and understanding the different approaches. So here, very briefly, the two main computer science approaches. I kind of think that you already know these approaches, so I'm just going to go very briefly. Lexical approach has been here around for a while. You have a dictionary, a lexicon, one or several ones. You have data like tweets or any emails, whatever it is. You compare the email, the data input with the lexicon, you match them and you compute a sentiment score. Then of course, also machine learning methods. There is a lot of machine learning and deep learning sessions here, so again I'm going to just very briefly go through that. There's supervised learning, unsupervised learning. You've got different algorithms that sort of like compute sentiment score according to classification or regression-based models or clustering. So these are sort of just to give you a very brief overview in case you're not an NLP person. So what is the psychological approach? I'm going to take a bit more time because I assume that it's not familiar to you. So psycholinguistics is concerned with language comprehension and the relationship between language and psychological process. So really, psycholinguistic researchers, they ask themselves, what insight can I get from language besides content, topics, and maybe sentiment? And very importantly, the psychological approach, it views sentiment as a continuum, so it's not positive, neutral, negative, but how positive? It's a continuum. And also, emotional experiences are multidimensional, so sentiment is just one dimension of sentiment, of an emotional experience. And I've sort of like, as you can see, content is not the same as joyous or excited, right? It kind of makes sense intuitively when we think about our own emotional experiences. When you compare and contrast these different approaches, so the lexical approach is based on a single word unit, on a unigram. Machine learning approaches can be bigrams or even more n-grams, so more than one word. Psycholinguistic is again based on one single word as a unit of analysis. So what is the unit of analysis? What are we looking at? The lexical approaches uses one or several lexicons combined. The machine learning does the same, but importantly it uses training data. And the psycholinguistic approach uses one big dictionary database. So based on these sort of like comparisons, we can say, well, the lexical to psycholinguistic approach might be similar because they're both based on one word as a unit of analysis. We could also say, well, the machine learning and the lexical approach are similar because they start off with the same dictionary database, the same lexicons, usually. We could also say, well, lexical machine learning approaches are similar because they compute sentiment in the same way, right? With subtracting the number of negative word occurrences from the number of positive word occurrences. That's how it's usually computed. But I'm open to sort of questions here later on. So how did we implement these different approaches? How did we test these propositions? With a Skype data set. Well, it was a tweet data set about Skype outage, I'm sorry. Skype was down on the 21st of September 2015. So then my co-author collected tweets with the Twitter streaming API and the Twitter 4J API package, and importantly, this is not a full sample, so it collected between 1% and 40% of all the tweets sent. So the same thing as the previous speaker said, it's just a snippet of all the tweets sent. It was a simple keyword search with hashtag Skype down or just Skype down, and she collected approximately 10,000 tweets. So I guess it's, in this context, a small data set, but still enough to sort of like check our assumptions. How did the lexical approach work? With the data set, what did we do? She removed the stop words, extracted the unigrams, obtained the sentiment score from the Bing Liu lexicon, and then classified the tweets into positive, negative, and neutral categories. How did she compute my co-author sentiment score with the machine learning approach? She divided the obtained data set into data sets, a training data set that was labeled and a test data set. She then trained the learning model with a logistic regression. She checked the performance, cross-validated it, and then run it on the unseen test data. And then she repeated this process. How did we compute the sentiment score with the psycholinguistic approach? When I got the tweets, I removed all the numbers, the web links, emoticons, special characters, and stop words. And I've tokenized the clean tweets, sort of like the usual thing that one does with NLP. And then I've used a psycholinguistic database, and I want to explain that a bit more. This database contains 13,950 word ratings, so it's a very big database. Each word, so each of these 13,915 words has been rated by 18 different individuals. So it's not just one person saying, oh, that's a positive word, that's a neutral word, but rather 18 different people, and sometimes even more. And they've rated positivity, sentiment positivity on a scale from 1 to 9. So it's not just either or, but rather a continuous. And when these people were asked to rate words, they were asked, how does this word make you feel? If it makes you feel completely unhappy, annoyed, unsatisfied, melancholic, or despaired, tick 1. If it makes you feel completely happy, pleased, satisfied, or contented, tick 9. If it makes you feel anything in between, then you can select the rating accordingly. So in that sense, we've got a more finer-grained view of sentiment. The database has also recently been used academically in top-notch journal, in the Journal of Consumer Research, the JCR, and that's the discipline I'm from. And it's the best journal, and the fact that these two papers have been able to publish there is just a testimony to the reliability, the trustworthiness of this database. So when I've sort of looked up the sentiment score in this database, I've computed the median and the mean for each tweet. The reason for choosing two central measures of tendency is that for those of you who do NLP, you know that data's not always normally distributed. So I want to have two complementary set measures of tendency in case the data is sort of skewed or else biased. Right, so that's what we did to the data, or with the data. These are the results. I've normalized the sentiments to range from -1, unhappy, 0, neutral, to 1, happy, so we can compare it. We don't want to compare apples and pineapples and bananas. If we look at the lexical approach, we could say, well, Skype customers were not very unhappy. They were sort of like they had a neutral sentiment towards the fact that Skype was down. The machine learning approach says, well, people were kind of unhappy and neutral. According to the psycholinguistic approach, both median and mean, as you can say, it actually gives you a much more nuanced picture. If you were a Skype manager for communications, you could see actually people were not terribly upset. In fact, they're even mildly positive. That's strange, isn't it? But it's an important insight. In order to compare these three methods statistically, I've computed Kendall's tau. I didn't want to use person's R because, as we can see here, the data is not normally distributed and also it's categorical data, so we want to use an appropriate measure. We could say, well, the lexical and the statistical approaches, they seem to be somewhat similar. Oh yeah, and of course all the correlation measures are highly statistically significant. So yeah, lexical and psycholinguistic approach are somewhat similar, but the learning, as soon as the algorithm starts learning, it starts to deviate. So that's an interesting one. With the learning algorithm, the sentiment score starts to change. And these numbers cannot be explained in terms of stop words or other data cleaning processes because they were the same for all three approaches. We made sure of that. So if you are a customer relationship manager or if you're working in any customer-facing role, that's not helpful. Because all that this is telling you is that there are three different methods and they arrive at three different conclusions. It doesn't help you to take a decision. So how can you take a good decision with good information, right? We've already heard that before. That's why I want to talk about the nuances of psycholinguistics. So remember before I said emotional experiences are multidimensional. So we've got sentiment positivity, i.e. how positive. But we've also got something called sentiment intensity. Both are from Wariner et al. That's a published database in the Journal of Behavior Research Methods in case you wanted to look it up. It's publicly available, so you could actually reproduce my research if you wanted to. Yeah, so sentiment intensity is measured with language arousal, and again, 18 or more different individuals have rated these 13,950 words, and they were asked to rate these words on a scale from 1 to 9, and 1 was anchored with completely relaxed, calm, sluggish, dull, sleepy, or unaroused. And 9 was anchored with completely stimulated, excited, frenzied, jittery, wide awake, or aroused. And as you can see, the words joyous and excited are almost equally positive. However, excited is much more arousing, it's much more stimulating. So there's two dimensions to an emotional experience: sentiment positivity and sentiment intensity. What does that help you to manage better customer relationships? There's something called customer delight, which some of you might have come across when talking about customer experience management, from Oliver Rosten-Warkey, and he sort of says, and a lot of other workshops I've attended into, say, well, delighted customers are more satisfied and more loyal than content customers. Applying this research to language, because delight is a word, right? So delight is a stronger positive emotion than content. So strong emotions more powerfully influence customer satisfaction and weakly experienced emotions. Kind of makes sense if you think about your own experiences as a customer when something's gone wrong, and you felt you felt this much more strongly, much more intensely, then of course you have a stronger emotional experience. The current approaches don't really help you answer these nuances, or they don't really cover that, because the word delighted and content are treated as equally positive from the lexical to machine learning approach, right? It's just positive or negative. And secondly, how these two approaches compute sentiment score. It doesn't really capture the differences, because these two sentences have the same sentiment score. It was a joyous event, but I was displeased about the weather. Would be the same sentiment according to lexical machine learning than it was a joyous event, but I was upset about the weather. Well, the first person wasn't really influenced by the weather, but the second person was influenced. So the first person you could just say, oh well, okay, but the second person would have maybe appreciated an umbrella or a roof or something. So managing customer relationships, the second statement requires your action, but the first statement doesn't. So of course we also measured sentiment intensity in the data set that we have. And what we found is that, again, sentiment intensity, mean and median, Skype customers were not terribly upset, neither in terms of positivity nor intensity. Well, maybe it's because it's a big data set, or maybe only very unhappy customers were really strongly upset. So I addressed this question by selecting the tweets 3 standard deviations above or below the mean. And I've correlated then these tweets, sentiment intensity with sentiment positivity. And what I found was, in a way, not what I was hoping for, but quite interesting still, because actually very unhappy customers didn't experience these unhappy emotions very strongly. And also with for both unhappy and very happy customers, the language got slightly calmer. So Skype must have done something right in this context, because despite the fact that their service was down, customers did not respond very negatively and very strongly. And as the numbers sort of like show, the differences are negligible, because with a tau of 0.11 and 0.10, it's not that high, is it? Despite being significant. So to sort of wrap this up, the methods or the ideas that I've presented to you, what can you do with these? You can monitor sentiment positivity and intensity with written or spoken language, and you can assess the impact of service recovery actions such as Skype, because Skype now knows that they did something right, they did it well. You could also monitor customer inconveniences. Remember when you ordered something online and it was delayed or the wrong product was sent to you? Sometimes you're upset about it, sometimes you're not, right? But for a company like, I don't know, Digitech or Microspot, it's helpful to know when does the customer mind of the delivery being delayed or wrong, and when don't they mind? And of course, if a customer minds, maybe a little bit more than an apology would be needed. It's also good to know when do customers get frustrated with self-service. We have a lot of self-service these days, right? From airport check-in to ticket machines at the train stations, it's everywhere. But when do actually customers want to speak with a human being? Because it's quite easy. It's very negative language that's highly emotional equals frustration. And frustrated customers, if it's a valuable customer, right, that's another conversation. But if it's a customer you want to keep, you maybe want to give him a human being to speak to. You can of course also monitor the performance of complaint handling or call centers by analyzing customer language. I mean, you've got voice-to-text transcription tools quite easily available. And with all of that, you can of course reduce the market research cost and customer insight cost. Yeah, and I'm already coming to the last bit. Thank you. Something more that I just want to introduce you to very briefly. There is even more from psycholinguistics, something called language abstractness, and with language abstractness you can measure the similarity between brands or ideas or products. You can measure brand or product knowledge from individual customer or customer groups with language abstractness. And with those ideas, I